8.5 years ago, in April 2016, Kumamoto was hit badly by a number of powerful earthquakes. Just a few weeks before the quake, I was in fact in Kumamoto and also to get into touch with local colleagues. Meanwhile, in Vienna, where we were planning our first field visit in September of that year, Ralph and Wolfram were joking that our field has possibly vanished given the experiences since the Great Tohoku earthquake a few years before. Luckily, that wasn't the case. The region was severely hit but was not as devastated like the coastal areas of Tohoku. Since then, my affection to the area has grown to such an extent that I've decided to live here if possible. And even though my main research interests are surrounding the relationship between the society and its surrounding nature with a special focus on the issues related to common pool resources. Now, more than 5 years of living here have opened me numerous aspects of the region, from geology to prehistory, animal ethology to climate observations and paleobotany and many more fields. For the first time, I'm delighted of having an academic driver's license, and approval by senior peers that you're able to understand and apply scientific methods while maintaining to be fact-based in your inquiries. Hence, the idea of talking a little about my view on future developments in Aso was very appealing to me, yet I'm no specialist in futurology at all. Initially, we were trying to re-examine the Aso region with new research questions and methods, as much as continuing the Viennese tradition of Aso research by means of a longitudinal area study of a rural region in Japan. Sorry for you listeners today. One of such new approaches is to let the computer speak with my artificial voice that has been processed by artificial intelligence to read my typed version of my talk. To get to the point, I will start my view on the future shock in Aso. Everyone here has probably heard of the butterfly effect, that the flap of a small butterfly's wings in South America's rainforest can trigger a storm in China. The idea goes back to Edward Lorenz, a researcher in the field of nonlinear dynamics related to forecasting the weather. The theory of nonlinear dynamics provides the theoretical basis for understanding chaotic systems. At these, the accuracy of the input data is particularly important. The more weather stations, the more precise measurements are possible, and these will help the forecast be more accurate. However, our planet isn't all over covered with such observation points, so that any kind of sampling from the real world therefore only provides approximated source values. In any prediction of the future, we are trapped in the imprecision of capturing the present reality. We only have a certain horizon of knowledge at a given time. Like as with weather forecasts, we can utilize certain new tools to look as far ahead as possible, perhaps 2 to 4 days. Weather satellites are a good example. However, even today, a weather prediction a week or a month ahead would likely be less accurate or even completely wrong. Under these limited prerequisites, I would like to try to sketch a future picture of the Aso region in the following. My focus is on the one hand on a global perspective, namely the current progressing global warming. For the sake of having a point of orientation, I here assume that average temperatures will rise by up to 3 degrees Celsius compared to the year 1900, depending on latitude and location of the planet and other factors. As a second component, I would like to look at a neat tool to look at recent regional population developments and whether these are useful both in context of my own approach chosen today and if we really can rely on the data given, especially when considering sources and possible time intervals of a few years up to a few decades. Thirdly, it is also important to set an analytical framework. Although it would be nice to look at the year 2065 or 2070 with regard to a new Vienna project in 50 years, I don't want to reach completely into the void, but to orient myself on existing models that refer to the year 2050 in the 2 fields mentioned above. After all, that is just 25 years ahead of our time. And what happened just a quarter century ago, we may ask. Do you remember the 9/11 terrorist attacks? Not that long ago, I'd say. Following futurologist Alvin Toffler, who wrote that the great explorers in past centuries didn't know so much about what was lying in the blank or unknown parts of their maps, I would like to emphasize that we should not be afraid of the future. On the other hand, this does not mean that we should live carefree into the day, but rather make preparations for an expected future, even if we do not know exactly what it will look like. Yet we are able to foresee what is expected to happen if certain conditions are met. In the following I will try to do exactly that. It can be assumed that the predictions about climate change made by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, are common knowledge among educated contemporaries. According to data, the average global temperature has been rising since the Industrial Revolution and is continuing to rise dramatically over the past century. Such sudden spike has never happened in geological terms before. Despite problems of comparability, the transition from the Paleocene to the Eocene about 56 million years ago is often used as a reference for such a development, which had a special position in the development of our planet and life. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, PTM. So, how was it like? Geologically speaking, this period was a brief interval of about 200,000 years characterized by a 5 to 8 degrees Celsius global average temperature rise and massive input of carbon into the ocean and atmosphere. Actually, it was about 10 degrees higher than today. Climatologists therefore take the PTM as reference to forecast the likely effects of massive emission of CO2 into the atmosphere in the present time. The continents looked a bit different than today. The Indian subcontinent was still a huge island and would eventually partly crash with the Eurasian continent in the north. The Himalayan region is still a very active tectonic zone. The other part of the ancient Indian subcontinent moved westwards to crash into Africa, and the Kilimanjaro volcano came into appearance. This in turn has ceased the influx of humid monsoon winds to inner Africa, where the former rainforest turned into a savanna. In what is known as Japan today, the Izu Peninsula was more or less still part of today's archipelago of the Philippines. The polar region was almost free of ice. In fact, paleontologists found fossils depicting the image of a warm climate in the northern hemisphere. There lived giant animals, and ancestors of contemporary horses were the size of fox. The oceans in the equator region had temperatures around 35 degrees Celsius, and the oceans were acidic so that almost all coral reefs were melted and doomed. Most of these living beings became extinct during later time. Yet artiodactyls such as sheep, deer, hippos or pigs for the first time came into existence. Later, some of those prehistoric ancestors of the hippos decided to live in the sea. The ancient greenhouse effect made a lot of places inhabitable. Let's come back to the present. According to the IPCC, average temperatures on the planet have risen exponentially since the 1900s. In the late 1960s, when the first Viennese research on ozone was carried out, they were still about 1 degree Celsius below today's temperature. Given the exponential tendency, these might be rising to about 3 degrees in 2050. I would like to take this opportunity to briefly point out that we have been in a small ice age over the past centuries. So we have to go back a few thousand years, 8,000 years to be precise, to find temperatures comparable to those of today. The Japanese archipelago was already populated by humans back then. Now, let's have a look at an archaeological site of that time. Luckily in Kyushu we have lots of them, and some are even of that age. One example is not far away from Saga City, the Tomie Shell Mounds. The site was part of an early Jomon settlement at the mouth of the river near the coast. If you stand there today, the coastline is located about 10 kilometers south. In that time, global temperatures were about 0.5 to 1 degree Celsius higher than today, and the ice mass at the poles had melted much more since the Ice Age ended only a few thousand years in advance due to an enormous rise in temperatures. This had caused a partial melting and consequently sea levels had risen to the coastline where the site is located. The coastline of Kyushu 8,000 years ago corresponds more or less with the projection map that Greenpeace Japan provides to illustrate the rise of sea levels due to global warming in 2050. According to that, almost half of Saba Prefecture is under the sea, even densely populated areas, such as parts of Fukuoka or the river mouth of the Midori River in Kumamoto. Considering the population density in these areas, we need to ask where these people would to go to if they don't want to turn into kind of whales or get drowned. Just a side note, many airports at the coastline would cease service. Large parts of the infrastructure needs to be changed if the contemporary global warming would continue to spike up. Just to keep in mind, global temperatures have already risen far beyond the 0.5 to 1 degrees Celsius 8,000 years ago. According to the Japanese Meteorological Agency, in 2023 the temperatures had risen at least 1.24 degrees Celsius in the past century alone. Several heat records were broken in Japan in 2024. In spring it was 1.5 degrees hotter, and in summer there were not only places where temperatures were measured at over 41 degrees. The number of days on which unbearably hot days above 35 degrees were measured in numerous regions has also increased noticeably in recent years. There is also less snow in winter. A German newspaper has recently reported on that as well. The ski resort on the Calderas Cone of Oso closed decades ago due to lacking snow. Without a proper amount of snow and less wetlands, in Oso the future capacity of the groundwater the caldera provides to all over Kyushu is possibly questionable. Floods and landslides in the wake of typhoons will also become more powerful. The above-mentioned Tomie Shell Mound is elevated about 5 meters above the sea level, but is defined as the average sea level in Tokyo Bay during the years 1873 to 1879, almost 150 years ago. Although we do not have the exact observed level for contemporary Japan, it has risen at least about a meter in the past century as observed worldwide. I don't want to act like Cassandra warning, yet it's obvious we need to prepare for the coming flood. Next topic, that is big data shit. When talking about Japanese efforts to revitalize rural areas, people often refer to a web interface coined RESAS, Regional Economy and Society Analyzing System, in which a vast amount of available governmental databanks and statistics are accessible and put into context of each another. You can do many things within the system, such as extrapolating future trends in demography for all Japanese communities. For instance, the system provides projections for the cities Aso, or Kikuchi, or even the whole of Saba Prefecture in 2050. It's even possible to look at where tourists are visiting in Mine, Miyaso, or other municipalities. Data on future population can even be plotted on heat maps like here for the areas surrounding Kumamoto or even Saba that I suspect is likely be under tides soon. Cool shit, one might delightfully say. But did I forget something? Well, when looking into the details of that wonder machine RESAS, we find out that multiple data that should be available by authorities isn't included, for instance, those by the Japanese Meteorological Agency. Considering topic of the previous section, we need to take into consideration that a large amount of today's coastal population needs to be relocated in near future. Discussions about a declining population and rural and often located in elevated mountain areas, all of these demographic projections of 2050 are for the cat, as we would say in German language. Producing future projections with a biased choice of available data is at least a grave mishap. One could even speculate about political intentions to influence public opinion on regional development. I come to conclude this talk. The construction of large-scale chip production facilities around the Oso area will surely have an effect on socio-economy, a rise of wages in the vicinity of the facilities. However, as far as I can observe and say, the expected influx of high-income foreigners in the region has not happened so far. The natural landscape is also very much transformed due to large-scale solar power projects financed by external capital. How will people in near future perceive the region in spite of all these futuristic large areas at the outer slopes of the caldera? Another challenge will be the increasing influx of foreigners from Southeast Asian countries. Will the Japanese local residents be ready or willing to include these into their society? We need to see how authorities would act considering future lawmaking towards a more inclusive and multi-ethnic Japanese society. Will the often encrusted practices inside the local authorities be flexible enough to deal effectively with the challenges ahead? Will Japan be ready to meet all these challenges? In Minamiaso village, with an overall population of about 10,000 residents, the overall number of foreign nationals has risen from about 50 in the year of the large earthquake to 150 in 2023, that is 1.5% of the population. The latest numbers for October are 205 foreigners, while the Japanese population is decreasing every month, so that the quota is currently exceeding the mark of 2%. An amount of 0.5% in a year, and the trend is exponentially growing. Even in this field we find a topic discussed by Toffler about work in the superindustrial society done by volunteers. I'm currently involved in such volunteer-based integration efforts for foreign residents. Perhaps we're already part of what is future, or are we in fact the future? I'm an optimist, and hope is that foreigners will one day become part of this society. And I know that many of them like to work in sectors rather not popular among young Japanese, such as agriculture or construction work in remote parts of contemporary Japan. In Aso, for example, the Aso farmland, a popular destination for tourists, wouldn't be able to maintain their services without the more than 50 employees from Nepal. Their community has grown to about 1,000 expats living in Kumamoto Prefecture alone. Many of them are in fact specialists in specific areas such as electrical engineers, and not only trainees. By visa status, specialists are allowed to bring family members to Japan who add up to the numbers. Current Japanese economy would implode without this alien workforce. Yet last but not least, in my opinion, the most striking challenge for the region will be to provide place for coming inland climate refugees from the coastal areas. Is also as a representative for many other rural areas in Japan ready to provide answers for all these crucial developments? 50 years ago, there was no recess available for our honored teachers in the 1960s. They had a typewriter, and they were proud of having one of those. There's even a documented receipt by the Japanese customs for that typewriter brought from Austria. Then it was possible to go to a town hall to access family registries of individuals, which is today an absolute no-go. In 50 years, artificial intelligence will have become way more powerful, and they will have many more tools and questions for scientific analysis we cannot even imagine today. It will be a much warmer climate then, and torrential rains will be monstrous. Perhaps it won't be even possible to take a flight to Japan due to climate restrictions. Will future folks be visiting Aso virtually or by kind of telepathy? I am convinced that we do not need to ponder about the situation today, nor need to be anxious when looking into what is going to come. The PETM has brought a lot of new species. Something similar might happen too. Further on the time scale, some of similar strange species and those we know of our times will not make it through the glacial age that will follow the warming. I'm sometimes jokingly comparing the hinterlands of the Kilimanjaro to the Aso caldera, which one day might turn into a savanna with offspring of escaped emus from the Kikuchi Emu Garden. Who knows for sure? When looking into the future, we need to stay positive if we want to keep humankind alive. Be prepared, not frightened. Finally, I hope that those who might be willing to do another encounter to the Aso area after 2050 will have the same fun as we've had since 2014, and that they will be experiencing the warm-hearted people in Oslo. So, thank you for your attention. And thank you for having me.